our last theme of Africa is the same as it was at the end of class on Thursday. And we're going to look at some power imagery from Central Africa. And so we're in the Democratic Republic of Congo again. And we have what we call a power figure or a Nishki Nakande. And these come from, like I said, the Congo, right? The people of the Congo. And so in this region, right, sacred medicine and divine protection was a very basic central belief to their belief system. And so what I mean by that is you would have special ceremonies or perform certain rituals in order to protect oneself. In order to protect oneself or one's community. And so the Congo believed that the great god, the Congo, brought the first sacred medicine down from earth, or down to heaven, or down from heaven to the earth, in a special earthenware vessel, which basically means a clay vessel. And a lot of the imagery, so I kind of go back to this, right? Colonials, when they saw this, right? So the Europeans who came to Africa, when they saw imagery like this, they were quite shocked and outraged. A lot of the missionaries thought that they were sorcery or heathenism, and so they destroyed a lot of that. There's a great example of one of these at the Art Institute of Chicago. And so this kind of object, right? When we look at it, it is not voodooism, right? It's not voodooism. However, concepts of voodooism do come, like, eventually they kind of do matriculate and transform from objects like these that existed in Africa, right? Before and during American slavery, okay? And so a lot of those traditions, right? Were morphed eventually into things like voodoo that you guys see in, like, of course, like probably the most famous that you guys know is like in New Orleans. When you travel there, there's often you can buy a voodoo doll. These objects, these sculptures are not voodoo, right? They are not meant to hurt anyone. Actually, they're meant to do quite the opposite. So let's just take a first look at it, right? So we're looking at form and content. Let's describe the pose and the expression. Let's look at the pose and the expression. The theme is power. How is he powerful? Who can give me one thing about him that makes him look powerful? Jump in on audio, please. Jasmine, pick on you since no one's volunteering. What about his pose, right, and his expression conveys power?
His hands are like on his hips.
Right, so he's got his hands on his hips. Anyone else have another? Look at his arms, his legs, his buttocks. Aaron?
What I will say that his legs, his feet are really big, and his calves look larger as well.
Right. So he's got like bigger feet. His hands are on his hips. He's muscular. He's actually in a wrestling pose, right? So he's actually has the body and the pose of a wrestler. And then look at those eyes. They're really big, right? I don't think he has a grimacing look on his face, but some of these actually do. Notice how his mouth is open and you can see his teeth, right? So he is stiff, he's alert, he's muscular. This one, I don't think is necessarily as angry as some of the other ones I've seen, but he has kind of an aggressive mouth, right? His mouth is open to speak, right? And he has a lot of sharp objects projecting from his body in numerous places. And this is where a lot of people look at this thing and go, oh, it's voodoo, right? It's meant to hurt someone. It actually is quite the opposite. So this is a type of fetish object. So this is an object that's inanimate, but it's worshipped for supposed magical powers, and it contains spirits. And so what people did is they had these nakandes built for their village, for their town. And they had a prominent position in the community. So these were things people could see, right? It almost be like a historical sculpture in the center of town. And they range from sizes. You actually can see here, two of them are human-like, and then one of them is actually a dog. They don't always take on, like, sadly, I've never seen one in a museum, but supposedly there's dog or other animal examples of these as well. And so basically what you do is you purchase one of these from an artisan, right? And it comes basically there. So it comes as a wooden sculpture with a container. Now, this one has a circular container that almost has a crack in it, almost like female genitalia. But a lot of these have like boxes, like stuff in the front of them. And often there's elements of glass or mirrors, and they are these bolongos. So these vessels at their belly are called bolongos, and they are containers that represent the spirit world. And so basically what happens is, let's say, I'm going to pick on Jeffrey because he's in the classroom. Jeffrey, you wrecked my car. We got in a car accident. And so sadly, you have to pay to fix my car, right? So basically what we would do is we would take a nail and maybe like a hair of a mouse, and we're gonna nail it into this Nakande figure. And basically what that would symbolize is that you're gonna quickly repair my car so that we can continue to have a good friendship or good relationship as teacher and student, okay? So basically, this is a way of kind of sealing a deal and bringing harmony to the people, right? So often these biongos have symbolic imagery inside. They might have a mouse hair, which is symbolic of something quick, because mice scurry really fast. They could have seeds, right? Seeds are fruitful. And so these are things that you would want to multiply. So if you wanted to have you wanted something to happen and to become fruitful or prosperous, you'd want to have seeds in it. It also sometimes has human hair or nails clipping, or even blood inside of it. And then what you would do is you would attach either symbolic objects or you would activate it. So the activation is where you're putting those nails, right? If I go back to this one, see how the front of him is covered in nails, right? So this means this guy has been used a lot. Every single one of those nails symbolizes some sort of agreement between two people or two groups of people. And so they did this to end war or conflict, to seal partnerships, to make a pact, to swear innocence. I'm not guilty. I'm going to swear my innocence because this powerful creature, right, is going to do something bad to me if I'm lying, right? And it could be heal the sick. So these objects were used over and over and over again. So they contain magical medicine that basically creates equilibrium in a community. It makes us okay. Does that make sense? Right? So notice none of those things are like causing harm to any person. But you can sort of see how concepts of putting nails in a human body, right, eventually would morph into another sort of thing like voodooism in the American South and Caribbean islands. So they did have master carvers, like I said, these are the Gandas, and they basically carved the wooden sculptures themselves, and then they would sell them in the market so that you could buy them if you needed them. And they were more than just a carver, they were also a spiritualist. So they would chant songs while they made them, and add those special substances into the interior to help cure any problem that might arise in your community. So very much like Hawaiian tradition, remember when we looked at the Hawaiian cake, how it had like kind of like mana and ceremony that was incorporated into it. You can see very similar kind of ideas of singing and adding things in the creation of it to add that sort of spirit to the object. Any questions on our Nkisi figure? Nkisi, I should say. Okay, still in Central Africa. Now we have another mask of a woman, and this is a female mask from the Chokwe people. And so we're going to watch the Smart History article on this one. And as we watch it, right, we'll be looking at the style of it. It's rather short. Make sure you're taking notes as you watch.
We're at the National Museum for African Art, and we're looking at a mask made by the Chokwe people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this mask would have been danced by a male dancer, even though we're looking at a mask that represents an ideal woman. The masker, who's a man, and the carver, who's a man, would have made this to honor women, particularly women who were young and fertile and had successfully given birth. Because there was an honor in Chokwe society given to those women. And this is also a culture that is matrilineal, that is, the family line is passed down through the mother. And one of the reasons to dance this mask was not only to honor women who were at this stage in life, but also to recognize the founding female ancestor of the Chokwe lineage. It's made of a wood that's very thin and difficult to carve. We see fiber and this elaborate hairstyle. We have to imagine the rest of the costume that would have been here when the mask was danced. And this would have been a tight-fitted body stocking covered in raffia cloth. The dancer's groin area would be covered in a loincloth, and he'd be wearing wooden breasts. And we're using the word dance, but from the descriptions, the dancer walked in a very graceful and stately way. And Chokwe women actually do dance like that. It's very graceful and fluid and slow and respectful. And when we say he's wearing a woman's face and he's wearing a woman's breasts, he's not impersonating a woman. He's really meant to honor women who have courageously gone through childbirth and retain this inner wisdom and beauty so beautifully articulated in the facial features. And we see that sense of calm in the face. And the fact that her eyes are closed and her mouth is closed suggests is turning inward. She's not talking. She doesn't need to talk. At this point in life, she deserves respect. And she doesn't have to open her eyes wide. She's already knowing. The mask itself is a deep, dark red, which was probably created through a mixture of red earth and oil, but there's white kaolin or white powder around her eyes. And this whiteness is connected to the spiritual realm. In fact, her eyes are the most important part of the face. They're abstractly big. And it draws attention to the fact that she has the spiritual ability almost of second sight, that her power comes from being able to give birth. The face is very symmetrical. The chin comes to a narrower point. The broadest part of the face is by the eyes and the ears, this wide forehead that is accentuated by the hairstyle. And we have these constant circles that are bisected by the lines of the mouth or the eyes. And then we also have the circle of the earring in the ear. This mask was obviously really loved. In fact, we can see a repair on one side of the face so that they could continue to use it. We also have pounded dots around the eyes, which further emphasizes their cylindrical nature, but also suggests women's tattoo patterns. Women wore a whole host of different tattoo designs that had special references and special meaning. So the Chokwe people were little known until the earlier part of the 20th century by Europeans. Europeans, in particular Portuguese, didn't begin trading with the Chokwe until the early 1900s. And so they weren't documented in such a way that other groups were. However, the Chokwe had been part of a larger kingdom from which they broke away. They had trading relations with many groups throughout Africa, and so they certainly didn't exist in isolation. And there are about 1 million today in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as this mask shows us the ideal woman and ideal virtues, her hairstyle would have been fashionable at the time, so they could really see themselves in the mask when it was being performed for them. So this is an ideal of womanhood in so many ways.
Okay, so a lot of similarities to some of the other masks that we've seen from different groups. And so the Chokwe people, like I said, are from the Congo, and they have their ancestry, since I can't say it today, I'll say comes from the woman, right? So it makes sense that these masks are typically revered women of Chokwe society, right? So here's another example, and you can see that they vary in style. They don't all necessarily look like the one we just saw. However, there is always this emphasis on these large closed eyes, right? And so these were made after a successful childbirth, right? And they show the prosperity of women in their society and honor women for bringing people to their society, bringing people to their group, right? And so how does it represent ideal womanhood? These are some of the things you probably wrote, right, in your notes as you were watching the video. She's very dark. They used clay and oil to give these a beautiful shade, right? So they're intentionally, or they're really kept up. Like people took time and care to basically keep that surface nice and shiny to reflect beautiful dark skin. And so she has scarification, like they showed, around the eyes and onto her cheeks. She has a nice wide forehead. She has that white clay that was added around her eyes to represent spiritualness, right? And this idea that her eyes are closed shows that she's all seeing, right? She's all seeing, even though her eyes are closed, right? She understands it all, she's experienced. She has really, this one has great hair, right? So it's braided and coiled in a very popular sort of hairstyle of the day. And she has that calm, serene expression on her face. These are pretty common or pretty stereotypical of the Chokwe. And so the hairstyles would change depending on what the fashionable hairstyles were of the day. Right, so here's another example of a Chokwe mask. Here you can see that this scarification is a little bit different. Here it's more like linear patterns. And this one does have some of the rope and some of the raffia braiding, but it also has it carved into the surface rather than just applied like the one in the art image said. Right, and so function is it's used in dance and ceremony to honor your female ancestors, so your female ancestry. And so it connects the spiritual world with the actual world and brings prosperity to the community. Let's see an image of this. They mentioned it in the video, but they didn't show it. So this is what it would look like. So the men of the community would dance and dress up like a woman, right? We saw this in other communities in Africa as well. The only one that we have that is women dressing in masks is the Saudi Society, which we used for our essay. All the others typically are men wearing the mask of female ancestors. And so the man would cover himself basically from head to toe. You have to disguise him so that he took on the persona of his female ancestor, right? And so he would dance once again in a female style of dance, and he would conceal his body. So they added breasts to the costume. There'd be a loincloth across his midsection to cover himself. That way he looked more feminine. Right? And so here you can see that they're real brightly colored, right? Right? And so then it was part of the ceremony, revering your female ancestors, right? So that's where you got your family line. Any questions on the Chokwe? Okay, last one. We have a Lukasa board or a memory board. This is from the Luba people, also from the Congo, right? And so looking at its shape and its design, does anyone have any idea how it might be used? This is, they call it Lukasa or memory board. Based on its shape and design, does anyone have any idea how it might have been used? Or how you would have held it? Kind of reminds me of like a cell phone in a way. These are small and typically handheld or small enough that you can hold them in your hand. Right? So basically, these help you remember, right? These help you remember history. And so these objects are made based on a oral tradition. So basically what happens is you hold it in your left hand and then you use your fingers of your right hand to remember or to record the history. So there's beads and shells and other things on the surface that all represent different concepts in the history of your people. Right? So the Luba people basically use these oral traditions in order to keep the traditions alive, but also to tell stories of their kingship and lineage and so on. And so I honestly don't know how to pronounce it, but this is the Mbudye Society, right? They were the ones who used these to record the history and to also provide counsel to the leaders. So they would be able to basically interpret history in order for those to learn from the past mistakes so that they could help rulers lead well. So he's a member of that society, and so he's reading about the past in order to inform the future, right? He's trying to help the king or chief lead, right? So here's the Luba chief, right? And so here he's holding Lukasa, and so he's showing that he has the right to reign here. And then here is the society. And they basically would teach future generations how to read the Lukasa. So you'd have to memorize what all those different elements mean, and you'd have to memorize the stories in order to inform the next generation, right? So these memory boards, this one is not the one in the 250, but some of them look very much patterned, and so it's kind of more like easily read or decorative. And so you can see how your eyes or your fingers can travel across it. But most of them are a little bit more abstract. And so this one's a really big one because you'll notice that there's all different kinds of shells all different kinds of beads, they're different shapes, they're different sizes, they're different colors. And all of these things have different signifiers. Now, I don't think you need to memorize what all of these different things are, but I think it would be good to understand that there are beads on here, right? That there are different kinds of beads. There's shells on these things, and all of these things kind of mean different elements to the society, right? So it makes sense that, or I shouldn't say it makes sense, but let's say a bead represents a person, right? What size of bead would it be for a ruler? A big bead or a little bead? What do you think? Isabella?
The big beads.
Right. So a meter would be a big bead, and then you might have a bunch of little beads circling around them, like this one on the upper left, right? So we have a big bead with a bunch of little beads around it, so that would signify a ruler. You could also have a series of beads or elements, and that might represent a journey or a path or some sort of migration, right? The different colors could represent different classes of people or different groups of people. Red is often used to represent violence or warfare. But these things could all represent your genealogy, migration, lineage of rulers. They could express maps. They could also tell stories like proverbs or songs that the group of people could learn from. So this is the content and the function of this Lukasa board, right? So the content is it has elements of these things on it. These are the stories it tells to inform leaders on learning from past mistakes, right? You learn from the past. So some of these actually are quite interesting. They don't just have the beads and the shells on one side. Sometimes they actually have portrait heads and have decoration on the back. Kind of reminds me of like some of the scarification and body patterns people have, right? And that is the end of Africa. Any questions? Okay. I would like to do a little bit of review. Let's go ahead and start with the Kahoot on Americas, since we're going to be looking at the Americas as well. So let's go ahead and get ourselves set up for that. Also, I'd like to see some faces on our cameras if I can, just to make sure people are actually there. We kind of lost that habit. So Katie, Raphael, Alana, Isabella, Maru, and Cora, you can come on camera, that'd be great. If you have any technical issues, let me know through the chat. Let's see if we can come up with a good